Welcome to episode 4 of Hypnosis Chat. I have with me once again the lovely Anjali Ferrara. Thank you for joining us. Today we have a few things to talk about. One of them is the feeling of being overwhelmed. Everyone has 100 different things to do every day, especially today more so than ever. That feeling of being overwhelmed not only leads to anxiety, but also it decreases our efficiency. So we actually get less stuff done. It's a lot like the way a computer works. If you try to make the computer do more things than it has memory for, everything will slow down and sometimes grind to a halt, and everything will be less efficient than if you do it, not necessarily one thing at a time, but at an optimal number of times. Ever feel overwhelmed, Anjali?
Yes.
Yes, sometimes.
Yes, sometimes.
So again, really the two main things about being overwhelmed are, number one, it leads to stress, and number two, it decreases how much stuff we can do. So, and we're never taught to manage our own brains. We're never taught in school how to control how we think about things so that we do them in kind of an optimal way. And that's kind of one of the things I wanted to talk about today. So let's see. So what's an example of being overwhelmed in daily life?
Work.
Work?
Yeah, that was my first question.
Okay. So what happens at work?
When you have to juggle multiple tasks at once and you kind of get overwhelmed, you get behind, and things start escalating out of control.
Yeah. And one interesting thing about the way your brain works is whenever you have a set of tasks, we have 3 stages to our memory. We have sensory memory, which is basically everything we're seeing and hearing. Like if you close your eyes, you get kind of an after image of what you're seeing, and same thing with what you're hearing. It lasts maybe a second or two. And if you pay attention to it, it goes into your working memory. Your working memory is much smaller, only holds 7 plus or minus 2 items. And then if you memorize it, it goes into your long-term memory. So we've got kind of this hourglass shape. And so we can notice a lot of things. We can think about a couple of things, and we can remember a lot of things. So because we've got this hourglass shape, we've got the bottleneck in the middle, where if we try to shove too many things in, it creates stress, kind of like a balloon. So this isn't a glass hourglass. This is kind of maybe like a rubber hourglass that kind of can stretch, but when it does, it creates stress. And if too many things are trying to go through at once, nothing gets through efficiently. So one of the interesting things about what you said with work, for example, is whenever you're given a certain number of tasks, like let's just say we said, you have to clean the kitchen. So you naturally and comfortably fill up your working memory with tasks related to that. Say, okay, well, I'll do the appliances, and I'll put the dishes away, then I'll do this or whatever. Everyone has the ability to comfortably fill that up. Now the problem comes in when somebody says, oh, I need you to do the kitchen and also this other room. So what happens is we already filled up our working memory, and generally we don't, especially if just one thing comes in at a time or a couple things, we tend not to reorganize that. We just try to shove in the new information. So it's kind of like if you're at work, you've got a certain number of things to do. You're sort of efficiently doing them, but then somebody says, oh, I need you to do this also, or this problem happens and this needs to be taken care of also. We tend not to reorganize, especially if it just comes in a little bit at a time. If you get a whole big task, you might step back and say, okay, I need to replan how I'm going to do this. But usually that's not what happens. Usually it's just, oh, this one other thing needs to be added in. Okay, well, we can squish that into the working memory. Oh, this one other thing needs to happen. Oh, this problem just happened that needs to be taken care of. So, and what ends up happening is this short-term memory, or working memory, the same word, it stretches that part and it makes it less efficient. Like all that stuff can't get through at once. So we end up being less efficient, getting less done overall. You ever experienced something like that?
Yes.
Okay, so do you know what I'm talking about, where you have a set of tasks that you know about, and then you plan it out,
right.
And then when one thing at a time comes in, it just gets a little more stretched and a little more stretched and a little more stretched. And then if you try to hold that all day, then you're inefficient and you're stressed out.
Especially if you pre-plan things like I do.
Right, exactly.
I allot 30 minutes for this, and then
Right.
something else comes up to
Right.
thwart my 30 minutes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Exactly. So, okay. So and we're not taught how to deal with that. We're not really taught how to manage our brain anyway in our society. So what do we do? So how do we solve this problem? Everyone, of course, has a conscious mind and an unconscious mind. The conscious mind is you. You're the conscious mind. Think of it, the part that you think of as you is the conscious mind. You do the thinking. You make the decisions. Your unconscious is the things that happen automatically. It's really more like a machine than anything else. Your unconscious is really the machine in the background that that kind of makes all the automatic things happen. So, you've got your conscious mind allots a certain amount of time, like 30 minutes or whatever, and if things start to come in, then it tends to start being overwhelming. So why don't you give me an example of that? Has something like that happened recently?
Okay, so if I have a couple of things to do, if I have, let's say I have a couple emails to write.
Right, yeah.
But I also, so you're trying to give me examples. So I have 2 emails to write, and they're relatively long emails.
Right.
And then you have to kind of squish in calls. That makes
sense?
Yep.
Yeah. And so if you have the same, and not necessarily with time, though that can be a factor also, but with your attention and how much you can think about at once and how much you're trying to keep in your working memory at the same time, you as the conscious mind have to take control, and it'll get to a certain point where it's like, okay, I'm not working efficiently anymore. I'm feeling stressed. I need to reorganize how I'm thinking about this. I need to step back. And it's a skill that everybody has. We just are tempted not to use it when things come in one at a time. So for example, if we've got, let's go back to the kitchen example. Okay, clean the kitchen. Great, no problem. And then actually we need you to clean the whole house. Okay, fine. So you have to actually step back. You can't think about every single thing in the kitchen and every single thing in every room. It's just, okay, I need to step back, and then kitchen is just going to be one thing. I'm not going to think of like 7 things in the kitchen. I'm going to compress kitchen into one thing, and then when I get there, I'll decompress it and work on it individually. So I'll just go, these are the 7 rooms. We'll just do one at a time. Everyone kind of has that ability, but we tend not to use it automatically when just one thing at a time comes in. So it's like, I'm doing the kitchen, and also, the dogs want to be let out. Okay, that's fine. And then the phone rings. And then I spilled something, and then this happens. And what happens is it gets bigger and bigger and it adds on stress. So what has to happen is you as the conscious mind, who is the leader of your brain, remember your unconscious is really just the machine. It's waiting to receive instructions. You as the programmer or operator have to kind of step back and say, okay, the amount of stress I'm getting is decreasing my productivity. I am doing too much right now, and I need to manage that so I can think about this comfortably. If you are not able to think about everything you're trying to think about comfortably, it means that you're being less efficient. And there might be other people relying on you. And what that means is, what we tend to think it means is that we have to do more stuff. But actually, it means the opposite. We need to more properly regulate how I'm thinking about the tasks that I have to do. Because the only way I'm going to be maximally efficient is if I organize things in a comfortable to think about way. If I'm stressed and overwhelmed, less is going to get done. So the best thing I could do for everyone around me who's relying on me, and also myself, is to make sure that everything I'm thinking about is comfortable. Does that make sense? So the key lesson here is the outside world needs to allow you to set things up that is in a way that's most comfortable and efficient for you. If you do it any other way, everyone is going to suffer. Most importantly, you're going to be stressed, you're going to get less done, but everybody else is going to receive less from you because you are doing things inefficiently. You have to make your efficiency number one, and the best way to do that is to make your mental comfort number one. So if you're able to think about everything that you have to do comfortably, then you can know that you're being approximately maximally efficient in what you're doing. Okay, does that make sense?
It makes sense.
So let's talk about that let's use some examples. So like for example, if you've got 2 emails to write and they're both long and they're different topics, And we naturally, whether it's 2 emails or 3 emails, it doesn't matter because we naturally fill out our working memory with whatever we have to do. So if you had, let's just say you've got 3 emails to do, you can notice how you would naturally fill out your working memory with those 3 plans for those 3 emails. So you say, okay, great. I've got 3 emails. I'll devote a third of my working memory to each email and we'll go. And then, maybe you get a call and that squishes its way in. It doesn't really squish its way in. You allow it to come in. So let's just say that, okay, I've got this call I need to make. Okay, we'll let that one in because I can still comfortably work with that. But then, now also it's time to feed the dogs. Okay, that you know how when something's about to come in before you've integrated it, you can tell that's about to push you over the line. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. That comfort line of, okay, that's going to push me over the stress line. Okay, so what needs to happen is before you let that in, you have to back up and say, okay, I need to quickly reorganize what I'm doing. We're just going to say those 3 emails are one thing. That's the emails. And we'll do that. Maybe that's not as high of a priority as feeding the dogs, for example. So the email thing is just one thing. And the dogs thing is one thing. And then the phone call I can do after that. So now you're back to just 3 things. You're feeling comfortable again, and you can do things efficiently. Now, it takes a little bit of practice, but this is really the only way to not be overwhelmed and stressed out. And in fact, it's the thing that people who are naturally able to manage a lot of things, they do this naturally. Maybe they picked it up somewhere, maybe their parents did it. They probably didn't consciously learn it, like go out of their way to learn how to manage their memory properly. They probably just picked it up somewhere and they said, oh, hey, you're good at that. So, but this is a skill that everyone can get. So let's come up with another example. What would be another good example of being overwhelmed?
Other than the office.
Like longer term things like
planning for,
a wedding. We're planning for a wedding.
A wedding or planning for like a trip.
Okay, planning for a trip, yeah. So like let's say, for example, that if you've got, elements to the trip like visiting family, going to play golf, whatever all the different things are. And then you feel like you've just got it and like, okay, I can handle that. And then something else comes in like, oh, well, that hotel's booked up now. We can't go there. Okay. So, and then being aware of like, okay, this step I'm about to go to will create stress if I don't manage this properly. You notice how that can do that? So don't just jump in and plow through the stress. Don't do that. So, okay, this next step is going to cause stress. Let me back up and reorganize how I'm thinking about this. Mm-hmm. And I might say, okay, we still have to plan the golf trip. We still have to plan the family thing. And we have to plan what hotel we're going to be at. So we've just got these 3 things and we'll take them one at a time. As opposed to, keeping the way you were thinking about it before and trying to shove more in, instead backing up, reorganizing everything you have to think about. That's the best way to do it. So if you feel like you're about to become overwhelmed by something, like, okay, when that happens, that's going to be stress. Pause, back up, and reorganize, refill in all the things that you have to think about so that it's comfortable. We already have the skill of being able to take a series of tasks and fill them in to our working memory. Like if I say, okay, you're done with everything. Now here's your next task. I want you to walk the dog, make dinner, and write 1 page of your paper. You say, okay, well, everyone has the ability to naturally fill in their working memory with those things. So everyone can take tasks and put them comfortably into their own working memory. It's when other stuff gets shoved in without reorganizing that creates stress and the feeling of being overwhelmed. So if, okay, all this stuff's coming in, I need to reorganize. So back up, say, okay, what do I have to do? I have to do this, this, and this. Okay? And then use your natural God-given ability to just fill that in comfortably. Okay, that's the stuff that I have to do. Some people like writing lists, some people don't. It's fine. The important thing is you are able to think about it in as broad or detailed a way so that when it's all in there, you can think about it all at the same time comfortably. If you can do that, then you are going to be in control of your stress level and whether or not you become overwhelmed.
When you talk about organizing, do you mean organizing them into this type of task? Like going, okay, I have 3 emails. Those are the emails. I have 2 calls. Those are the calls. I have 2 of the categorizing.
Yes,
Is that what you mean by reorganizing?
Yep, exactly. Yep. And, one of my favorite jokes of all time, I know you've heard this joke before, and many people have. How do you eat an elephant?
I don't know. How?
One bite at a time. You can accomplish anything if you break it down into small enough chunks. Likewise, you can think about anything if you categorize or organize it into big enough chunks. So breaking something down and chunking up are both equally useful. So if you need fewer items to think about, you want to chunk up, which means just putting things into categories. And let's just say that you've got 3 emails and 3 calls, and then you've got stuff related to the dog, and then you also have to make dinner. So that would be, so you could have all the office stuff in one chunk.
Oh, okay.
Like calls and emails.
Okay.
And then dinner stuff, and then dog stuff. That could be 9 items, which would be normally more difficult to think about. So on the other hand, let's just say you've got one task and it's too big of a task. Like I have to do a project for work that requires visual aids and this and that. So it's too big to think about all at once. In that case, it would be useful to chunk down. So that would be maybe, okay, first I'm just going to work on the outline. And that seems more manageable. And you're much more likely to do it and do it well because it's comfortable to think about. If you try to shove too big of a chunk into your working memory, even if it's just one chunk, it's still going to be too much to think about. So if it's too big of a thing, chunk it down into categories. If it's too many things, chunk up into big chunks like office work, dogs, house, etc. So, but the most important thing, this is actually of secondary importance. How you organize is of secondary importance. The most important thing for avoiding being overwhelmed and being able to organize your own thinking is to, number one, become aware when it's happening. Okay, either A, I'm starting to feel stressed, or if even better, if I think about this, if I add this thing in it, I'm going to feel stressed. Backing up, reassessing what you have to do, and then reorganizing it into your working memory. So thinking about it again, back all the way out and put it all back in there. Just that process of doing that, your brain automatically has the ability to put things in there efficiently. So does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Let's see. So I think that's pretty good for organization. And I think you had another question about the summer coming up.
Yes, I think I did. But
Well,
in all the talking about reorganizing, I reorganized my thoughts and I somehow slipped my mind.
Oh, okay. Yeah. When we were going to talk about weight loss and working out, which kind of goes with what we were talking about last week, which is motivation. Essentially, every single thing that I really think that most people only have one or two, like they only have 2 different kind of problems. And I've been thinking about this on and off for the last few years. Most people are either have an anxiety-related problem, something that stems from anxiety, or something that stems from compulsion. So, and compulsion, it's kind of like compulsion is you want to do something too much, and anxiety is you don't want to do it enough. And anxiety can also include the opposite, which is tedium. So I think almost all problems, like normal or common problems, come down to either wanting to do something too much or not wanting to do something enough. So like for weight loss, for example, it can come down to not wanting to eat healthy food or exercise and wanting to eat junk food and do, non-physical activities. And one thing that I've definitely learned over the years is that every single thing is not intrinsically desirable or not desirable. So every activity, for example, running, for example, is not inherently tedious, anxiety-producing, motivating. You can have a person who has the exact same neurology and they love running, and then the other person with the exact same neurology does not. And it really comes down to how you think about it. So one of the things that we talked about last week was that we can think about an activity, any activity, in one of three ways: either a tedium producing way, a confidence or motivational or success oriented way, and an anxiety producing way. So for example, let's just take exercise. If when you think about exercise, you think about it in a tedium producing way, then of course you're not going to want to do it. Now that doesn't mean that the activity is producing the tedium. It's how you're thinking about it. So for example, think about something that seems like a tedious chore. Viewer, Anjali, if you want to, think about something that seems like a tedious chore. You will notice that when you're thinking about it, you're thinking about the problem state not having been taken care of yet. So if you don't like exercise, some people do, some people don't. If you don't like exercise, and I say think about exercise, you will imagine the exercise that you should do in the future, like the exercise not having been done yet, like you have to do this thing in the future. Same thing with, like, if there's some kind of work that you don't want to do. Let's just say you don't want to do the dishes. That seems like a tedious chore. You are, I guarantee, thinking about the sink full of dirty dishes that you haven't done yet. And there are some people who enjoy doing the dishes and they like cleaning and they get a sense of accomplishment and they look forward to it. And those people don't think that way. They might think about the opposite, which is having a nice clean sink. Like people who like cleaning the kitchen, for example, will have this idea of the ideal kitchen and how clean and nice everything looks. And they're working toward making it match what they have in their head. And in fact, that's something that people who have motivation about, like if someone is motivated by some kind of work, something they're doing toward a goal, then that's generally how they naturally think about it, with or without any kind of training. So for example, if someone naturally enjoys, if they like exercise, or if they like a sport, for example, they might imagine being successful at that sport. That's their normal way of thinking about the sport. Or they might think about what their goal is, like whether it's getting more fit or whatever, and they can imagine successfully reaching that goal. You can notice, so for example, let's just do this little experiment. So let's just say, take dishes, for example. If you imagine, oh, I have to do dishes, and you see a sink full of dirty dishes, and I have to do those in the future. If you think about it that way, you are telling your brain to create a sense of tedium. If you imagine like a nice clean sink, you are more likely to, and of course, I would have to work with someone individually to make sure we're doing it exactly right. But in general, if you think of a nice clean sink and yourself finishing it, having a nice clean area, that's more motivating and less tedium producing than doing it the other way. Likewise with exercise. If you think about exercise not having been done yet and you have to do it later, then you are telling your brain to create a sense of tedium. Your brain creates tedium because your brain is a properly working brain and you're telling it to do something. Like if I go like this on the keyboard, all those random letters are not a mistake. The computer did exactly what I told it to do. I was just giving it mixed up commands. So your brain will do exactly what you tell it to do. If you imagine exercise in the right way, your brain will produce a feeling of looking forward to it, or at least less tedium and anxiety. It's something that you might have to work on a little bit, but that is definitely the way to think about anything in a more successful, motivating way. So for example, you can imagine, so let's just take the part of the audience that is on board with me. Some people might still have doubts, and I would have to talk to those people individually, but let's just the portion of the audience that's on board with this, let's run with this. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to think of a fitness goal related to exercise that you have for the future. It could be starting exercise. It could be doing exercise on a more regular basis. It could be improving your performance in a certain type of exercise, whatever your exercise goal is. Okay, so just get that in mind. Now here's what I want you to do. First, we're gonna do it the tedium producing way, just to get an idea of the wrong way to do it. It's always better to know the wrong way and the right way, because then you're less likely to do the wrong way accidentally. I always give the example of, if you take someone who's really smart from the past, like Thomas Edison, for example, and you put him in front of a stereo and just tell him to try to figure it out, he might accidentally turn the volume up too loud because he doesn't know what the buttons do. But if you say, this is the volume switch, this makes it louder or quieter, and make him do it wrong, like make it too loud, make it too low, he's not going to make that mistake accidentally, or he's a lot less likely to make it accidentally in the future. So that's why we do things wrong on purpose. So imagine, okay, so you've got this exercise that you want to do more of, or in a different way. Imagine it in the future not having been done yet, and tell yourself, okay, I have to do that. And it hasn't been done yet. Notice how that does not naturally create a sense of tedium. Like, I don't really want to do that. That's just the language of the brain. You're telling your brain to create a sense of tedium, which your brain does. It's just a computer. It's not trying to trick you. It's not trying to really do anything. It's just following your commands exactly as you say them. So now we'll do it the other way. The other way would be, imagine having accomplished that goal. In the same way that you think about, doing it successfully and getting all the way through it. In the exact same way that you might imagine brushing your teeth. Most people, when they imagine brushing their teeth, they imagine brushing them successfully and being done and having nice, clean teeth after that. It's the same thing with exercise. So imagine your exercise goal. You're doing it successfully. You're finishing it up. It was great. Maybe you exceeded your own expectations. And notice how that feels different than the other way. So does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. So I think everybody that was on board with me so far notices that that was the case. So that's kind of the first phase of any change. The second phase is making it automatic. That's where the hypnosis comes in. It makes that process very efficient. Without the hypnosis, I would suggest maybe practicing that, thinking about it, meditating or giving yourself affirmations over the course of a few days or a month or so. So, okay, is that, and the same kind of thing applies to eating also. Usually I use exercise as an example because it's the most concrete. But really the same thing applies to eating healthy food. Weight loss is actually a very complex topic, and we're certainly not going to cover all of it today. But insofar as it affects motivation, it kind of jives with what we were talking about earlier today and what we were talking about last week. Okay, well, looks like we're just about out of time for today. Did you have anything else, or pretty much good for this week?
I think we're good for this week.
Okay, we're good.
Those are
Okay,
questions.
thank you all very much, and we look forward to seeing you next time on Hypnosis Chat.